Greetings and welcome to Beatle Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatle stuff, on a track-by-track basis pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
I would just like to warn our dear listener that today's episode contains mentions of Dave Lee Travis. You have been warned.
I think that is a very valuable warning to have up front at the head of the episode, just in case people come into this unexpectedly and suddenly come across it as a sort of shock to the system.
Yes, but we will say that mention will come up. I was about to say organically, but I don't want to be. I mean, we're going to be pretentious because I think we're going to be talking about psychedelic music at some point, and we'll obviously get pretentious then. But yeah, so organic Dave Lee Travis. There you go. There's something to look forward to.
Lovely. All the best Dave Lee Travises are grown organically, so it's important that we maintain our standards when it comes to quality control. Not something that we have greatly delayed ourselves with on this podcast, but that's fine as well.
No.
Anyway, yeah, good. Right, how are you?
Yeah, good. And looking forward to talking about a really good album track. And one that sort of shows that where we're going with this as an album already, because we've gone from Taxman to Eleanor Rigby to then something that seems really, really simple, and a song that you can appreciate for its simplicity, but also for its complexity. There you go. How's that for pretentious?
Okay, I think that gets us off to a good start. Needless to say, we are talking about I'm Only Sleeping this week, so yeah, John Lennon's first substantive contribution to the album.
Unless of course you go by how much he thinks he wrote of Eleanor Rigby.
Yeah, let's gloss over that and not reawaken those clearly bullshit arguments.
Well, it's over 3 minutes just, which of course is a rarity. By my reckoning, this is only the third of the album tracks. I haven't sort of bothered with the singles to be over 3 minutes, and that's quite something. And it's at 3 minutes 2 seconds, and it only really manages that because of the way this song fades out at the very end. But it feels substantial, and it feels significant that we're now experimenting with music a little bit more, even though this is still a very straightforward song. I think the confidence in what they're doing means that they can extend it that a little bit more. They can play around with certain ideas within the song. And so as a result, I'm Only Sleeping gets the big thumbs up. There we go. Are we done? Are you about to do the outro now?
Okay, no, I think we're probably going to have to go into slightly more depth than that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. But you're not wrong when you say that this is a simple song. Like, particularly musically, the construction is pretty straightforward in terms of the chords that are used. It's E minor, A minor, G, C, B seventh. It's all pretty straightforward stuff. It is a semitone below normal tuning, which is, I'm sure everyone probably knows, but anyway, as a result of all the studio malarkey going on, so that does give it a slightly different texture. But in terms of the actual construction of the song, yeah, it's basically a few verses and a bit of a middle eight, and that's kind of your lot. But yeah, like you said, the confidence with which they go into this is really extraordinary. And we've had Taxman and Eleanor Rigby so far, and I think they both they are confident, but in very different ways. Like Taxman particularly is, I mean, again, sort of putting lyrics and lyrical interpretation to one side, it's easily the most confident George has ever been in terms of his songwriting, in terms of what he's able to achieve, and in terms of his ability to kind of find his own voice. And Eleanor Rigby, if it's a kind of spiritual successor to kind of Yesterday in terms of being like the McCartney song that only McCartney is on, it's still lyrically light years away from anything else that McCartney's kind of written at this point. And it's that confidence that's coming through. Well, now we have Lennon kind of for the third time in a row after McCartney and Harrison doing precisely the same thing, finding that confidence and finding something to write about that isn't just pulling from the usual book of, rock and roll cliches or even the other stuff that the Beatles have done. We've talked about Ray and we've talked about Paperback Writer. It's not that they're all love songs, that they're all, oh, my baby's left me kind of stuff. But this is, again, pretty much unprecedented as far as Lennon is concerned.
To go back to David Sheff's book of the interview just before he died, when Sheff says, "I'm only sleeping," one of my favourites, Lennon's replies, It's got backwards guitars too. Okay, not really significant, but this backs your point up. It says, that's me dreaming my life away. And that's all he's got to say about it at that point. But then actually, that pretty much sums it up. There is the narrative element to it that people have attached. It's like McCartney having to wake him up to get him to do some work, and all of those sorts of bits. But it's a song that's based on a very, very simple idea that, look, just chill, people. It's okay. I'm pretty relaxed. I'm only sleeping. I'm not a lazy sod. Just let me be. And I think to get 3 minutes and 2 seconds out of that one idea shows how far forward we are now moving, that we've gone from albums that are full of songs about I love you, you don't love me, or I love you and you love me, or you love me and I don't love you, to, well, oh, I pay too much tax, to poor Eleanor, poor Father Mackenzie, to chill, people. I mean, that's really significant, because even if you would say, oh yeah, but Rubber Soul's different, it is in places, but not in the vast majority of it. So we're doing something significant here, even if we're making it sound as insignificant as possible. I really am going for the pretentious levels today. I really am, man.
Well, I strongly approve. I think that is a really good observation as well. And the simplicity of the song really helps to kind of drive it. And yeah, it's not really narrative in any meaningful sense, and only in the loosest form that it is obviously about something. But yeah, it's not a narrative in the traditional sense. But the ideas that it's not only that it's a very simple idea, but it's a very concise idea as well. And for all of like the dreaminess and the lack of focus and this kind of almost sort of ethereal kind of state that the protagonist is in, the actual lyrical focus is really tight. It's a really well written song. It's a really well constructed lyric, and it's clever, but it's clever in ways that isn't flashy. It's not a showing off kind of cleverness. It's just it's using that simplicity and that conciseness of what it's about to kind of drive the lyric of the song. And I really like this lyric. It's not complex in its vocabulary, but it's a really well constructed lyric.
Yeah, there's something particularly effective about just rhyming morning and yawning and dream and float upstream.
Yeah.
Which really, I think, creates a very kind of relaxed, chilled but relevant image. And you think he's done it. As far as I'm concerned, Len's ticking all the boxes here. He's even sounding um there you go, my pretension has completely run out. He's even managing to make his vocals properly match the tone that he's setting through the lyrics as well, and I think that helps. And I think when we get on to talk about the cover, that well, two covers, little bit of advance warning there, but the one that most people will readily know, that doesn't happen. And you just think, come on, if you're going to pick this song, if you're going to sing this song, you've got to imbue it with some kind of appropriate emotion, and Lennon does. It's just again, I've said before, I'm quite often critical of the way Lennon sounds, but that kind of old man tiredness here, that kind of nasally sort of reluctance is just really appropriate.
Yeah, and some of that is, an artifice of what was achieved in the studio. Some of that is production technique with his voice being recorded and played back at different speeds. I mentioned it earlier, but that's the reason the song is a semitone below standard tuning. But it's really effective, and clearly part of it is the performance. It's partly the way that Lennon is singing it and what he's putting into it. And yeah, some of that is a studio artifice of the way that it's produced. But I think, and I don't really know whether this is intentional or not, but I think one of the most effective things about that sort of studio artifice on his voice is that it's not overdone. in the, again, to sort of take Tomorrow Never Knows, or She Said really as examples, but you can really hear how distorted the vocals are there, how much effect has been applied to them. But here it's relatively subtle. It's present, and you're aware that he doesn't quite sound like he does on some other songs, but it's a subtle alteration to his voice, and it fits the song perfectly. Yeah, it's slightly slowed down, it's slightly more brittle sounding voice, but it's discreet about it. And again, that kind of feels like it fits the tone of the song really well. It's a really well integrated component, which is, part of it. We'll definitely talk about other aspects of the production, of course, but piled on top of everything else.
Because this was recorded after the first batch of mixes had been done for the songs they'd already recorded. They, recorded I think 3 or 4 up to this point, and it was the first time that they'd really attended those mixing sessions, that they were then so much more focused on how things sounded, and therefore starting to take that lead in the process. And therefore, as a songwriter, you're able to say, look, this is what I want you to do. What effects have you got that will do this? And it does therefore seem that much more in line with how they had intended it to sound. And that intentionality really comes through the more you listen to the album as well. So I think that's particularly useful and particularly interesting. And I think the sophistication of that is supported by the simplicity of a great deal of the instrumentation. And there is, I'm going to do the pretentious thing again, there's a simplicity to it, and enough space in it as well to then allow you to play around with a few little tricks that will then pique people's interest. So you get little bits of the old backwards guitar going through until you then get to the solo. And I think actually it works for me as an effect. Yeah, I think on the second verse, I think there's a little line over the top, where you've been through it once, you then introduce something slightly different on the second verse in order to capture the interest and go, look, this isn't just the same thing all over again, and it really works there. I'm not, as anyone who's listened to one of the previous episodes will know, not a huge fan of the whole backwards guitar thing in general, and so when it gets to the solo, it kind of loses me a bit there. But actually, when it first crops up, it really fits, and you can sort of see why some people think that there is a justification for it in the balance between the real world and the dream world.
Lovely. That was very poetic. Thank you for that. I think when it comes to the backwards guitar solo as well, I think the intentionality that you're talking about also does really come through here, because it's not a random piece of tape that's just been stuck in. We talked about that in Rain, and Lennon had this story about how he accidentally put the reel on backwards and blah blah blah. Well, whether you believe that or not is one thing, but what we are absolutely certain of here is that the backwards guitar solo that George Harrison delivered is not random. He worked it out properly, had George Martin transcribe it, and then played it, and then it was reversed. So there's a huge amount of detail being put into that, and so the intentionality is not just around the production, or it's not just around the way that things will come together. It's really down in the details, and that backwards guitar solo on this song is one of the key moments in the thing. And I get that you're not a big fan of backward guitar solo in general, but I mean it is very effective, and it gives the song somewhere to go that isn't just the standard kind of like, okay, well, here's the instrumental break. And it feels, at least a little bit in this song, like the backwards textures have a coherence with the rest of the kind of concept of the song, rather than just being something which is plonked on it.
So with regards to that solo, it's really interesting. Have you listened to it then played the other way?
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Which is really weird, because no wonder there's reports of him fussing over it for hours and hours and hours, because effectively, in order to get that sound, he had to play something that's shit. He actually had to, something that sounds, must have really hurt him to have to play it really badly forwards, and not, he didn't play it badly. He obviously played it very well forwards, but he was playing something that is nonsense forwards in order to get that sound in reverse, which then just makes me wonder, why couldn't he learn to play those notes and then play it as though it's backwards? But I mean, I just think the layers that they went through in order to do that, to me, don't make any sense. If that's the sound you want, play that.
But you can't. That's the whole point, especially when you have kind of like the kind of
Yeah, I
fade-ins and
know,
stuff like
I
that.
know.
Like, there's no way of achieving that by playing it forwards. And again, it also shows how, staggeringly primitive the technology that they're
Yeah.
working with is. That's really the only option. But that's fine. It's 1966. There's nothing else to be expected. But I think Harrison really deserves praise for the meticulous detail that he puts into it. And again, whether you're like a big fan of the solo or not, there's certainly no denying the effort that he's putting into getting the correct sound for someone else's song. I'll say one thing. I think Lennon is just fantastic in this song, just pretty great from top to tail. But there is no way on earth that he would put that kind of effort in to getting it to sound that good. Lennon is capable of many, many things, but meticulous attention to detail is generally not one of them, and especially not in this kind of period. So, I think Harrison deserves real praise for the time and effort he puts into getting the right sound for somebody else's song, especially given how often he will say he felt marginalized by the others, but it's not affecting his input into the material which is being produced. He's still producing absolutely top tier work and really putting the effort in so that everything sounds
Well,
as
in
it should.
fairness, it was mostly he would lay that at McCartney's door, wouldn't it, about McCartney's bass lines. But
Yes.
then you could also lay that at Lennon's door on Let It Be when he's having to pick up the bass because, McCartney's tinkling away on the old Joanna. And yeah, Lennon as a bass player is something that I think most people could easily aspire to better.
That's a very polite way of saying he's not a
Uh,
good bass player.
I mean, he probably could have been a good bass player, but I just don't think he gave a monkey's about playing the bass on a song that wasn't his and he didn't really care that much about. But
No, I think that's a
yeah,
very fair observation. Speaking of the bass, we haven't actually touched on the bass line in this song yet. It's really something. It's a fantastic bass line in this song.
yeah, and it fills in the gaps as well because this is if dear listener, if you go back far enough, you'll know that I like changes of tempos, but I also like songs that stop and start, and silence within songs is a thing that I like, and I get that in droves here, which is fantastic. But what we also then get is the bass being the thing that links those silences to the songs, and it feels a little bit it's playful, it's melodic, it's a really kind of fun bass line that he's playing there that is I don't know. I mean, if we were to get really pretentious, it could be like the stop start of the heartbeat of someone sleeping, or I'm sure we could do all of those kind of things. But it's just, I think, McCartney having fun with because I think he's aware that the instrumentation is quite simple. It's a good strummer, this, and you've mentioned the simplicity of the chords as it is. So it's right. Okay, well let's have something that underpins this. Let's have something that really kind of lifts it and makes it a little bit more than just a gentle little kind of strum along. It's brilliant. It's a really good work.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I really love this bass line, and yeah, those little pauses, sort of musical ellipses, if you will, linking the different passages. My turn to go pretentious now, but yeah, musical ellipses linking the different passages of the song. That's unique. We haven't had anything like that in a Beatles album up to now. I don't think we've really had just just a bass line kind of standing by itself in that way. Maybe I'm forgetting something. I'm happy to be corrected, but I think up to this point that's unique. And I think you can hear McCartney, yeah, having fun, but also being challenged. Like, this isn't a song which is like anything else that the Beatles have produced up to now, and it's a challenge for him. And he produces a really interesting bass line that kind of helps to hold the whole song together. It's really a key component of the song, but also it's not too dominant. This isn't a big, loud kind of up front. It's quite a gentle. I think McDonald describes it as tiptoeing, and I don't think I would quite use that term for it, but it's quite a soft sound. It's quite a gentle sound, and again, it carries that nice, yeah, that nice form kind of through the rest of the song.
I mean, it's only tiptoeing in the same sense that the guy in the original R. White's Lemonade advert is tiptoeing through the house whilst he's singing in
Well,
quite a
yes.
deep voice. Now, there's a reference for our American listeners. You know,
Yeah, best of luck with that one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's not get into that one. But yeah, yeah, I no, it's not tiptoeing. It's not tiptoeing. I,
No.
I do realize that we have gone into various states of pretension here, and some of that is semi serious, I think, but some people have got really. I think this is a difficult point in the Beatles' career because they are starting to cross from, not quite into high art, but from popular culture. They are in the mainstream, but then they're trying to then elevate what they're doing as well and make it that little bit more sophisticated. And with that comes the kind of Aeolian cadence type comment from people, and you do start to see that a little bit more here. And with Jonathan Gould talking about the solo here, appearing to suspend the laws of time and motion to stimulate the half coherence of the state between wakefulness and sleep. And you just think, oh God, you must have been really desperate to try and fill the word count on your book there. It's just, you're pushing it a bit. And Walter Everett likening the song to a particularly expressive text painting. Well, when I first listened to the album, I found this incredibly accessible. I think this is one of the easiest songs to get your head around because Eleanor Rigby is so different from something you might hear as a 13, 14-year-old in terms of that. And, as much as I might have had the familiarity of the Jam's start, there's still something quite jarring about Taxman. And for no one, I wouldn't conceive as being a pop track until I hear someone like the Beatles do it. And I mean, next time we talk about Love You Too, and there's Tomorrow Never Knows, and there's all sorts of things going on here. I think this is one of the more accessible songs to start with. So I think, yes, you can talk about its dreamscape and all of that, but I think you can overplay it. I realize that you may now come back, and this is perhaps where we start to talk about psychedelia. Um, but I just think it's just really good. Stop being so pretentious, people. Can't something just be enjoyed for and of itself?
I mean, yeah, obviously it can, but given that we're now, what, 3 years into this podcast, I'm not sure we're the best people to be articulating that argument. But yeah, I think we do kind of need to touch on kind of the psychedelia side of things. But just before I do, I kind of want to agree with you about the accessibility of this song because there's a universality to it that you don't necessarily have with a lot of the other songs in the album. As a teenager, I was not paying tax. I didn't I didn't have experience of the kind of tragedy that Eleanor Rigby might revolve around or anything like that. But I'd lain in bed and not been able to get to sleep or remember that sort of feeling of drifting off to sleep or whatever. Like there's an accessibility to this which doesn't necessarily come across in every song on the album. There are some songs like Good Day Sunshine is extremely accessible, but for all the complexity of this song in terms of its production and in terms of the way that it's starting to breach the walls of psychedelia, I think accessibility is a really really important aspect that's not to be overlooked. And sort of talking about the psychedelia side of things, I think again, I don't want to overplay the psychedelic natures of this, especially if we're talking about psychedelia as a kind of artistic aesthetic rather than something which must specifically be written under the influence of LSD or whatever. But as an aesthetic, I think this does start to push at the walls of what we will come to understand as of psychedelia as an artistic movement as opposed to a specific consumption of drugs. And it's laying down the path that will lead us to she said, and then tomorrow never knows, and then on and on and on. But I think this is the first song, even Rain, I don't quite think manages to qualify, but certainly the first album song we've come across that could in any way be described as aesthetically psychedelic.
Right, help me out here because yeah, I mean, you lost me about 5 times during that. And as we discussed beforehand, I think we have different definitions of what psychedelic actually is at this point. So what are we talking about when we're talking about psychedelic music here?
So I'd say we're talking about a style or, yeah, an aesthetic in music, which tends towards recreating something which could conceivably be written by somebody who was under the influence of a psychedelic drug. So psilocybin, LSD, magic mushrooms, anything like that. And that aesthetic has kind of outgrown the specific kind of drugs or cultural references of the 60s to become a kind of broader term that refers to a style or type of music. So particularly anything which is sort of bright, anything which is abstract, anything which goes on above about 12 minutes of abstract wanky guitar solos. But as an aesthetic, yeah, anything which is abstract, anything which is feels like it's kind of free association, anything which feels like people will talk about something like, and we've mentioned it before in the podcast, people talk about things like Lewis Carroll kind of being like a progenitor of psychedelia. Lewis Carroll isn't by definition psychedelia because he predates it, but again, it's that free association, and particularly, and I think this is kind of the key thing for this song, it's that subconscious thing. It's the state that you're in when you free associate, when you dream, all those kind of elements. Now, there are other aspects of psychedelia that we'll discuss as we kind of go through this album, and particularly when we get to Yellow Submarine, which I think is a profoundly psychedelic song. But I think that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of this song, in terms of I'm Only Sleeping.
There's quite a lot in there that you could then just basically say you could apply almost anything to that, and I think that's the thing as well. So there isn't a specific sound. It's just something that you know you could attribute an awful lot of different kind of ideas to it. It's almost like, well, this is a song about sleeping and dreaming, therefore that's about an altered mind kind of thing, therefore it's psychedelic. I think it's maybe it's just maybe I'm just expecting something a little bit more out there, a little bit less traditional, and it almost then feels as though because there is some backwards guitar, therefore this is like, and he's singing about, just to kind of leave me alone. I'm not that traditional. It then becomes psychedelic. So it's not to argue with your definition. It's just a case of saying I just don't see it, and I wonder if it's become a term that can just get applied retrospectively to an awful lot of stuff, because it sounds kind of cool to do so. And especially
I think there is an aspect of that. I have to say, I do think there's an aspect of that. But I that's also why I describe this song as kind of like the start. This is starting to push against what will come to be sort of like full, and particularly English psychedelia, which I think is quite distinct from American psychedelia. But that's also a conversation for another day as well. But yeah, this is the start of that process. It's not the full thing, and depending on where you want to go in terms of the Beatles and psychedelia, like if you compare this to something like I Am the Walrus, it's obviously not that. Yeah. This is much more simple. This is much more kind of baby steps. But I still think that this qualifies as the beginning of that journey. But you're right. Like psychedelia as a term, and particularly as a term applied to like mid-60s music, is horrifically abused. It's like that. Ooh, anything that sounds a bit out there. Oh well, we'll just call it psychedelia, and then we'll have like an aesthetic and a quality applied to it. Whereas a lot of the stuff which gets stuck under that label isn't very good and isn't necessarily even that at all.
Yeah, I'm expecting something that sounds a little bit like Piper at the Gates of Dawn, or a bunch of people wearing tie-dye shirts, really. And if it does,
sure, or Sergeant Pepper. I mean, Sergeant Pepper is kind of one of the architects of psychedelia.
Well, visual. Okay, right. Yeah. Okay. That's a conversation. I say visually, yes. Hourly, yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah,
We'll return to this debate
we'll return to
in
that.
about 6 months'
And
time.
maybe it's worth flagging that one of the weakest tracks on there, in my opinion, is "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," which is an attempt at that kind of dreamscape, and you can see how that is. Oh, I saw those eyes widen there as you heard my preview review.
It's very interesting. It's not that it's not. I'm not going to tip my hand and say whether I agree with you or disagree with you. I just didn't know that that was your opinion of Lucy in the Sky with
Oh
Diamonds.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it won't be much of a shock for people to know that I really don't like the way that Leonard's voice sounds on that. I think that's at his most whiny, or most nasally, shall we say? But there you go.
It's definitely nasal.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. But to get back to the matter in hand, okay, so psychedelia, it's a thing. It's a very brief thing as well in terms of um, the Beatles' career, and then of course there's a tail afterwards as other people are attributing various things to it, and it goes through. I mean, basically, in my mind, having said that, I associate it with tie dye shirts. So remember, eventually that leads to global hypercolor.
Oh my God. There's a reference I didn't need to be reminded of. Thanks for
That's very
that.
1991, isn't it? I mean, you've
It
already mentioned.
really, really, really
Well,
is.
you reminded me of the fact earlier that of course when I first met you, you were a self-professed insomniac as well. So I can then see the association that you would have had with the topic in this song. But then also at the same time, at that point at university, there were quite a lot of people wearing global hypercolor. Uh,
Yeah, it was a big
it
thing.
was well, it was a thing. Um,
Yeah.
a pretentious thing, and maybe pretension and psychedelia go hand in hand.
I think that's probably not an unfair association to draw. Yes.
I think it's time to talk about cover versions. So let's talk about Suggs Baby.
Okay. Well, sucks cover version sucks. And I don't really have any way of pulling my punches on that one. I remember this being released in I think it was 1994, so it would have been our last year at university, and it was really bad then. And I don't think I've probably listened to it and since then until this morning, and it's still really, really bad. It's terrible. It's not the worst cover version he released in 1994 because that would be Cecilia, which is somehow worse. I don't even like Cecilia as a song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. But it's a really terrible cover version. A lot of decisions that were made there should not have been made, not least of which was releasing it.
Well, yeah, and it's produced by Sly and Robbie, who are renowned as being master producers. Although I'm not overly certain from looking through the list that there's an awful lot in there that I would go, yay, that was great. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, they made an awful lot of money and made a massive name for themselves and very, very successful. And what the heck do I know? But yeah,
Well, I'm sure they were a big get for Suggs to
yeah,
produce this, you know.
yeah, and well done him. Yeah, well done. Um, yeah, it's just not needed. Look, we often say it's much better to do something different with it. So the fact that they're doing a reggae influenced cover of it at least means it's a little bit different. That doesn't necessarily mean it's any good, but at least they're doing something. They're not just doing a straight run through of the song. So
No, and I actually
well
don't
done.
mind the slightly drunk horns on it. Like they're okay. You know what I mean. I'm sure that that's not what they're meant to be, but it's what they sound like. But there are other decisions on it which I just like, especially that little ooey 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 ooh thing that it gets stuck in after like the first or second line, which is really terrible. But I don't mind the slightly drunk brass. That's okay. But for the rest of it, yeah, it's pretty worthless as a piece of music.
Well, I've got another cover for you, although this is very much in line of the Jam's start being a cover of Taxman, because I give you a Mr. Jay Lennon with "Watching the Wheels" from
Wow.
1980's Double Fantasy, um, and there's a slightly jokey reason for saying that, obviously, but for years I've had this I don't know. It's one of those things that I know that I've heard someone say that there is a distinct link between them, and I never really understood what it was because I know they don't really sound alike. Watching the Wheels is perfectly fine. A very, I mean, even more straightforward and normal than this. It's not a great bit of work, but it's perfectly fine. But it was only, I think, recently that I kind of cottoned on to, maybe when I first heard it, I thought, well, it's just this rich guy moaning about people saying, hey, do some work. But I kind of get now there is a lyrical similarity. So, in 66, he was a case of, look, relax, everyone. I'm with it. Things will get done. But then in 1980, he's effectively saying, I'm just enjoying doing nothing. I'm quite happy, and don't worry about me, everyone. This is the life I want to live, and I'm loving it. And good on him. So I think that thematically that it's worth mentioning that he's revisiting a similar topic, and I like the fact that he's doing it metaphorically here now with watching the wheels. I like that idea of I'm just sitting here watching the wheels go round and round.
Yeah, I really like watching the wheels. I think it's a rather great little song. I've always been very taken with it. I generally think Double Fantasy is pretty good as an album goes up, if not for no other reason that it's nice to hear Lennon being produced by somebody other than Phil Spector. But I really, there's so much good material that Lennon produced in the 70s. I just feel Spector just ruined. I really don't think he was a good producer for Lennon, even setting aside all the obvious problematic things with Phil Spector, just purely in terms of the music that was produced. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. Yeah, you're quite right about the thematic links with Watching the Wheels, and I really like that too. Yeah, that's really nice.
I think there's something quite stilted about the way it bridges between the verse and the chorus that sort of feels a little bit Radio 2. But yeah, and
Oh
that's
yeah, but that whole album. I mean, if you
oh
listen to things
yeah,
like
it's
"Woman"
fine.
or "Beautiful Boy," like it's all that.
But
That's his 1980 aesthetic.
I think Double Fantasy was my first exposure to Lennon because my nan had that, and so I was aware of it. I don't know if she bought it before or after he died, but I know it was weird. I mean, it must have been before because then it sort of, remember kind of going through the record collection on Sunday when we go up there for Sunday lunch and it being one of the few things that was actually sort of vaguely interesting. Uh, you know, that was Jack Jones, for example. I mean, who who are these people anyway? Um, but and it was definitely one of the more interesting songs on there. But it's quite a straightforward album. I think that's the interesting
Yeah, for
thing.
sure.
But
At least the
that's
Lennon half of it is.
yeah. Well, okay, fair enough. And but at least that's the state of life he was in at that point, and that's fine. And as he will often say, he likes to think he writes better when he writes about things that he knows. So he knew about raising Sean. So let's write about how happy you are doing that.
It's interesting that given that McCartney is usually the straight one of the two, he released McCartney 2 in 1980 compared to Double Fantasy, which is considerably more sort of challenging and experimental, and also great. I love McCartney 2, but also that's not the song we're talking about today. So yeah.
But interestingly, then the Beatles YouTube channel does have some updated videos. Obviously, although again, let's have the conversation about oh yeah, we invented the video. Okay, right, fair enough, whatever. Yeah, let's not do that. Maybe save that for Strawberry Fields, perhaps. They have gone through the process of creating or asking artists to create videos for some of the Beatles songs. And there is a particularly good one by artist M. Cooper for this, which has a dreamlike state to it. And it is, it's visually, it's really interesting. It kind of tells a lot of the story of the band through a dreamscape. It's sort of like an animated version of the Free as a Bird video, only considerably better. And it really reminded me of a TV program that I used to actually really enjoy watching on BBC One in the mid 80s, that was hosted by the aforementioned Dave Lee Travis. Now, do you remember the Golden Oldie Picture Show?
I do remember the Golden Oldie Picture Show, but I bet I haven't thought of it since about 1986.
No, that's the association that I had. So
Okay,
for
nice.
listeners who are not of a certain age or from a completely different country, obviously this was about 3 or 4 years into the music video revolution, and so therefore the idea behind the show was that there were 2 decades worth of pop songs that had been released, chart hits that had been released that didn't have music videos attached to them. So Dave Lee Travis, Radio 1 DJ at the time, and had been since the late 60s, would sit by the fireplace in what was either a studio made to look like a cozy farmhouse, or maybe it was where he lived. And anyway, and he would introduce the videos that the BBC had commissioned, and so people would then make videos of bands by like the Animals. There's Procol Harum. There's a particularly hilarious one for Lola by the Kinks, but it was those kind of songs. There's really weird Manfred Mann one as well, but it was great. It was a really interesting thing to watch because it kind of showed you some songs from the 60s that you didn't really get to hear that often, but were regarded as being kind of classics for some of them perhaps a little less so. But it was just a really fascinating way of saying, you've heard the song, now let's look at the visuals. Most of them are really kind of, traditional. Some of them are particularly odd. The Manfred Mann one is particularly odd. The Lola one is just funny, and I don't think I could have seen it at the time. Otherwise, I probably would have realised what that song was actually about. As when I was a 12, 13-year-old kid, I almost certainly didn't know what that song was about, even though it is kind of obvious once you listen to the lyrics. But then, as we know, I don't really listen that closely to the lyrics that often. So yeah, so it was kind of weird seeing the Beatles, the good people behind the marketing of the Beatles, who are the most active people involved in the Beatles these days, the marketing team, good on them, producing these retrofitted videos that just then got me thinking, those halcyon days when Dave Lee Travis was merely the hairy cornflake and not, note to editor, please check before releasing, a convicted sex offender.
Yeah, well, you always have to check with any sort of DJs from the 70s or 80s now, just in case there's some kind of overlap, don't you? It's a bit depressing, really, but oh well.
You sure he
Um,
did? I mean, he definitely went to trial. I know there were an
yeah, I
awful
don't
lot of
know.
couldn't reach a verdict, but I'm pretty sure he was convicted of at least one. So I think I'm okay saying that.
I don't know. I'm going to do a quick search now.
Well, certainly do it before you release it.
Yeah, that's safe. Yeah, I think he was. I think he was found guilty. Anyway, good. What a happy way to continue the discussion of this song.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah, God, the Golden Oldie Picture Show. I haven't thought of that in such a long time.
there's not
Um,
much available
I'm
on
going to get.
YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to say. I guess probably not an awful lot of it available around if he has in fact been convicted.
No, well, he certainly has been airbrushed out of the repeats of Top of the Pops on BBC Four on a Friday night. He's another one of
No, well, I
those.
mean, part of the problem with watching any of those is that so many have been airbrushed out that there's
Yeah,
not a great deal left. I mean, obviously Jimmy Savile's the big one,
yeah.
but he accounts for such a vast amount of the output of Top of the Pops that it really narrows down what it's actually possible to see or listen to.
But I think that's only right though, bearing in mind there are victims to consider, and also
Oh
the
well,
mess.
yeah, I'm not saying it's
Yeah,
wrong. That's not what I mean at all.
okay. I just wanted to make sure I got that in, just in case it looked like I was being flippant about um, you know, the man they used to call the hairy cornflake. I think he used to call himself that, didn't he? It was when you
I
give
think,
yourself a
yeah.
wacky nickname, you just think there's something not right about you, mate. Okay. And is he
Can
still alive?
confirm.
Do you think he'll sue? I don't know.
I don't think so. I can confirm he was in fact found guilty of a sex assault. I found a BBC
Okay.
article from the 23rd of September 2014. So we are fact checked and we are correct.
Okay. Right. Good. 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 I mean, not good, but yeah. Okay. Shall we move on?
I think we probably should, don't you? Do you have anything else that you wish to say about the song? Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think what I would say, the only thing I've got left to say was that if it wasn't for that guitar solo, if it wasn't for the backwards guitar, I'd probably give it 9 out of 10. But I'm going to fine it a whole 1 mark because of the sodding backwards guitar.
So you're giving it an 8.
I'm giving it an 8.
Okay, lovely. I'm going to give it 8.5.
Okay.
I'm not bothered by the backwards guitar solo. I think it's fine. And I really appreciate the time and effort that went into it. And I think George did some excellent work. So I'm I'm going in the other direction. I'm going an extra half mark because of that.
Going by that, okay, appreciating the time and effort, that means you must really, really like that Stereo MCs album that followed up to Connected, that took them about 5 years to record, or maybe the second Stone Roses album as well. The amount of time, the effort that went into those records, you must really.
I could appreciate the time and effort while still thinking the end result was a lot of old bollocks. That second Stone Roses album is not good. I can't comment on the second Stereo MCs album because it didn't exist. They only ever released one song and it was Connected, and it's a good song, but that's fine.
I saw
anyway.
That live.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was supporting U2 on I think the Joshua Tree tour, or maybe it was the Rattle and Hum one. Yeah, Wembley Stadium, man, innit? Yeah, I quite like the Stereo MCs, but then I remember when the next album came out, Q magazine, as it was then, saying that yeah, it took them longer to record that than the entire length of World War II. And you just sort of think, okay, right, so they're going to have to produce something pretty dramatic now in order to live up to that billing.
Yeah, good. Well, hopefully, in what, I don't know, 20-year war next or 100 years war next. Okay, right. Shall we draw a veil over this before we?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we should. All right, lovely. Well, thanks everyone. You've done a great job getting this far, and we're impressed and grateful, or at least I am. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Anyway, look, stop talking. You can really get a hold of us. You can get a hold of us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com, and as always, we love hearing from you. We're on the Flaming Remains of Twitter @Beatles_ology, and we are Beatles Stuffology on Instagram. You can also find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot, where I talk about books and film and TV and music and just basically anything that happens to catch my eye. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher user so that more people can find the show. Next week, we will be talking about Love You Too. And as always, we hope you're going to join us for it. But until then, keep listening.